All right, it's here. It's the start of training camp. The first week of camp is this week. It starts on Wednesday. Pitt will hold its first practice in the South Side on Wednesday and get training camp underway. And from there, it's just a drive straight through till August 31st when the Panthers open the season against Kent State at Acrisure Stadium. Once training camp starts, we're going to be in it. It's going to be that grind through the month of August, just trying to get to the point where you get to play football games again, you get to watch football games again, you get to write about football games again, you get to talk about football games again. We're very much looking forward to that. And in the meantime, we're going to be talking a whole lot about this team, which we've been doing for the past, it's July. We've been doing it since December, so how many months is that? Like 8 months? Because that's what we do. All we do is talk about Pitt sports all the time. And so for you and for me, thinking about Pitt is just what we do. Sometimes somebody will ask me, hey, how can you do a podcast every day? Even if it's only 20 minutes, how can you write about or talk about Pitt every day? And I'm like, look, that's all I do is sit around and think about Pitt. The only difficult thing about the podcast is deciding which topic we're going to talk about and distilling the thoughts down to 20 minutes. And so that's just what we do. It's what I do, and it's probably what you as a Pitt fan do, is you think about Pitt all the time. But inevitably, at some point here in the next month, leading up to that season opener against Kent State, and it might be in the next couple of days when, as the start of training camp gets underway. But inevitably, at some point, your neighbor or your brother-in-law or, your cousin or your coworker, somebody who knows that you're a big Pitt fan, somebody who maybe only has a passing interest in Pitt and doesn't really follow all that closely, at some point they're going to ask you, hey, how's Pitt looking for this year? How's Pitt going to be this year? And what are you going to say? It's funny, when you have these conversations, and I get into these kind of conversations a lot. People are always like, hey, how's Pitt looking? How's Pitt going to be? The first thing you have to do is sort of gauge the level of that person's interest. Do they really want to go deep? And they start talking about whether Rylan Gandy and Tamarian Crumpley and Rashad Battle can pick up after, Marquez Williams and A.J. Woods and M.J. Devin. Do they want to go that deep? Do they want to dig into the offensive line depth? Or do they just want some general sort of overview of how the team is going to be? It's the first thing you have to do when someone asks you, hey, how's Pitt going to be this year? That's what you have to ascertain, is how deep do you want to go on this? How serious are you about this question? Or do you want something rather superficial? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do today. On today's Morning Pitt, to start the week, we're going to give you sort of an overview of the main points to make when you're talking to your brother-in-law, your neighbor, your cousin, your coworker, whoever it is, who asks you, hey, how's Pitt going to be this year? Today is all about getting you brushed up on the cliff notes, the important points to hit on, to talk to somebody about Pitt so they know what to expect if they decide to take more than a passing interest. So that's what today is. It's the 2024 season primer is what we'll call it, entering training camp right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 2024 season primer. That just kind of came to me, but that seems good enough. Let's roll with it. It's the 2024 season primer, and it's for me to talk to you and also for you to talk to your friends so you know the important points to hit on. Now, if they think that you've got a lot of good information and they're really impressed by what you tell them, send them over here to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Tell them to go like and subscribe so we can feel good about ourselves here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And that way they don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And if you are not liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel, you should do it too so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have these daily morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, in season, off season. It doesn't matter. We talk about Pitt all the time. And then we'll have lots more this week. We'll have press conferences, interviews, practice highlights, all those kinds of things. You're going to find them all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss any of it. You need to be subscribed. The button's right there. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We timed it up right. We are in our final position preview this week. It's the safeties. We've gone through every position, offense and defense, started back in the last week of May, all the way through June, now all the way through July. And we will wrap it up this week with a look at the safeties. How's that for timing? How's that for your off-season content, getting you ready for the Pitt 2024 football season? And we've got a lot more. We've got recruiting coverage. We've got basketball coverage. Got a great article on the front page right now about Keith Gavin, the wrestling coach, and what he thinks the House settlement is going to mean for his program and his sport. It's an interesting perspective you're not getting in a lot of places, and I highly recommend that you go check it out. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, so somebody asked you, hey, how's Pitt going to be this year? What's up with Pitt this year? What do you say? Anything you say has to start with this. Well, okay. If you ascertain that they really don't want all that much depth or anything out of your answer, the first thing you say is, well, it all depends on the offense. And then you see how they respond to that. And if they're like, oh, okay, cool, we'll keep an eye on that, then all right, your conversation's pretty much done. You can turn it to like, hey, don't you hate how the Steelers did Kenny? If this is someone maybe you don't want to speak to again, that's a good way to turn the conversation. But if you say, well, it's really all going to depend on the offense, and they say, oh yeah, how are they looking? How's that offense going to be? What are they looking at this year? Now the door is open. Now you can say, well, I'll say it to this way. Last year they had the worst season of Pat Narduzzi's time at Pitt. Worst season in 9 years. They won 3 games. And at the end of it, he fired the entire offensive staff. Now, that's not entirely accurate, right? He didn't fire the entire offensive staff. He fired 4 out of 5, and the 5th guy ended up leaving in January or February to go to the NFL. So maybe you don't want to say he fired the entire offensive staff, but you could say he replaced the entire offensive staff, because that is true. That is accurate. Frank Cignetti's 2 years as offensive coordinator are over, and you can add this little point when you say he replaced the entire offensive staff. You can say that includes 2 guys who were on his original staff in 2015. In the running backs coach and the tight ends coach. You don't need to name drop Andre Powell and Tim Salem. You could just say the running backs coach and the tight ends coach, and that'll make the point. These are long-time assistants the whole time. The only assistants Pat Narduzzi has had ever since he was hired at Pitt, and he let him go. That's how bad the offense was, and that's how bad that season was. And here's the next important point to make. The Narduzzi just had the worst season of his time at Pitt, that he went 3-9. But he didn't just take it laying down and say, oh, shucks, well, we'll try to get better next year. He made drastic changes. And you might even use the word desperate. And this is something I've been wrestling with. I'm going to write about this on the message boards, and I've talked about it at different times, of whether you want to refer to Narduzzi's measures as drastic or desperate. But however you feel like you can best convey it, this is an important point to make, that Narduzzi went completely outside of his comfort zone and away from anything he has ever done offensively. A completely different offensive coordinator. You can say, look, he's had like 5 different coordinators. And I think that's mostly right. Chaney, Canada, Watson, Whipple, Cignetti. You can say he's had like 5 different coordinators, and nobody has done what this guy, Cade Bell, is looking to do. Hey, Bell, oh yeah? Where did he come from? So he came from the FCS level. Came from Western Carolina. They put up a bajillion points there. And so it's one of these things where like, well, if the scheme translates, if the system translates, if you can execute the system at this level like you did at that level, they might just have a chance to put up some points. They might just have a chance to win some games. You know, they might be pretty good. What kind of offense is it? Well, it's all tempo. This is the thing about this offense, is it's tempo. They are going to go fast, and they're going to try to catch defenses off guard. They're trying to get defenses confused by going so fast that the defenses don't have time to get lined up and ready and set to go. And then they're going to try and use quick concepts. They're going to get the ball out quick. They're going to try and get the ball to the playmakers in space and give those players a chance to make plays. Oh, all right. They have like guys who can make those kinds of plays. Well, they brought in a bunch from Western Carolina. They brought in like 3 guys from Western Carolina. Now, all of them are about as tall as my 11-year-old. I mean, my 11-year-old's like kind of tall for his age, but nevertheless, you use your appropriate height-related hyperbole, as you see fit. You say, they're not very big, but they're fast, they're shifty, and they made a lot of plays in this offense at Western Carolina. They know the offense, which I think is probably a pretty big help. I don't know if they're going to be the leading guys, but I think they're going to play, and I think they'll make some plays. You know what I mean? They got home run hitting ability. It's just about whether or not Cade Bell can actually get them open like he says he can, and whether the quarterback can get him the ball. And here comes the next question. Who's going to be their quarterback this year? What are they looking at? Who are they probably going with? So this is key. This is one of the big points is Nate Yarnell. And you can say whatever you want to say about Nate Yarnell as far as whatever history you want to give him, the fact that he was part of the 2021 recruiting class, which means he never took a visit to Pitt prior to committing due to the pandemic killing all recruiting visits for a year and a half, or whatever it was. You can say, well, he made his first start at Western Michigan in 2022 and threw 12 passes, but was pretty good on those 12 passes. You can say he finally got his chance to start last year when he started the final 2 games of the year, beat Boston College, lost at Duke, threw 3 touchdowns and 1 interception in those 2 games. Or you can say, and this might be the best way to sum it up, well, he's a redshirt junior. Forgot the year there. He's a redshirt junior. In reality, if he started all year last year, they probably win 7 or 8 games, as opposed to 3. Oh yeah, wow. Why didn't they start him if he was that good? Well, I think there was some amount of uncertainty, and there was the fact that the offensive coordinator just had his guys that he wanted to go with. Oh yeah, they had like that local kid, right? Kid from Penn Trafford. No, it was Pine Richland. They brought in the guy from Pine Richland, and he was terrible. He did a terrible job. And so they replaced him with another transfer, a kid from Penn State, and he was really bad too. He had a win. He had a huge win over Louisville, but he went 1-4 as a starter. And during the 5 games he started, he threw 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he also fumbled a handful of times. So he was a complete disaster. Dracovic, the guy from Pine Richland, was a complete disaster. And finally, for the final 2 games, they go to Yarnell. And while they didn't win both games, he was efficient, he took care of the ball, and he got the ball to the receivers. And there were even times where the receivers led him down. I've often mentioned there was a touchdown that should have been caught in the win at Duke, but the tight end couldn't pull it in. And then like 2 plays later, he throws an interception on a play that should have been, defensive pass interference. So, missed an opportunity for another touchdown, end up with his 1 interception in those 2 games. And, potentially could have changed the course of the game with that little sequence there. So it wasn't necessarily Yarnell's fault that they lost that game. And he's going to be the guy this year. And he's efficient. He does a good job getting the ball to the receivers. So if this offense, again, we're going to come back to this point. If this offense works as well as it's supposed to, if it's designed as well as it's supposed to be designed, if it's all that Cade Bell has cracked it up to be, or the guys who have worked with him before have said it is, then I think you've got the right quarterback to get the ball to the receivers. He might not be flashy, he might not, wow anybody, but I think he's going to get the ball to the receivers and give them a chance to make plays, where it comes back to then the design of the offense and the ability of the receivers to get out in space and make a guy miss and hit home runs. Now, what about that tight end? You said a tight end didn't catch a touchdown pass at Duke. Was that kid, the kid who jumped over the what was it, a West Virginia player? No. It was Tennessee, and that was Gavin Bartholomew. And Gavin Bartholomew has to be a weapon for this team. He's really, really important, I think, because he's a really good player, and they just have not used him enough over the past few years. But that's going to be a decision for the offensive coordinator, just like not using him over the last 2 years was a decision for the offensive coordinator. We'll see. I think it's going to be really important to get the ball to Bartholomew, but you're going to also have to get the ball to those playmakers in space, and they're going to have to actually make plays. All right. Well, so I guess if Yarnell's good and the offense, the scheme is pretty good, they should be all right. Yeah, should be. We'll see. What about defense? Seemed like their defense took a step back last year. It did and it didn't. The sack numbers fell, but also they were getting fewer opportunities for sacks. It's funny, like teams were willing to run the ball on Pitt last year. Oh, yeah, I remember watching some of that. Their run defense was terrible. Yeah, yes and no. It was and it wasn't. They had a lot of games where they had a ton of rushing attempts against them. Now, there were a couple moments, like the Cincinnati game was a really bad one against the run. And the Syracuse game was even more embarrassing. Syracuse had like their 3rd-string tight end taking wildcat snaps and running at will on Pitt. That was an embarrassment. That one was. And the Cincinnati game wasn't great either. But some of these other games where they put up bigger rushing totals, it was largely because teams were just content to run the ball 50 times. And they were content to run the ball 50 times, partially because they were having some success with the run, but just as much, if not more, because there was no threat from Pitt's offense. You're not going to be aggressive with your offense and try and push the ball down the field if you are not worried in the least about the other team scoring. And so, I know I'm a broken record, but it comes back to the offense again. Defense had some holes last year. Defense had some issues last year. Defense was not as dominant as it has been in the past. But I think I think the whole scenario looks different if Pitt's offense has a pulse. If Pitt's offense is not a like ticking time bomb about to blow up all over itself repeatedly, multiple times per game. All right, so you think if their offense gets better, then the defense should improve? Well, yes and no. It's going to be tough. They lost like 3 pretty much locked-in starters to the transfer portal. Their defensive line that didn't really have actually more like 5 locked-in starters to the transfer portal, like 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers. Their defensive line really doesn't have anything back. They weren't great last year, and they lost pretty much everybody from that group. So I think they brought in, 3 transfer defensive ends and a couple transfer defensive tackles. Those guys are going to have to play and be a part of it. And, you hope that they'll produce, but you really don't know. You're still waiting on some of those local guys like, Nakai Johnson and Sean Fitzsimmons. Oh, hey, what about Aaron Donald's nephew? Yep. Elliot Donald, he's still here. Really hasn't made much of an impact yet. Been a bit of a disappointment so far when, with not making an impact. He's got like 2 years left. Him and Nakai Johnson were in that 2021 recruiting class. So they're redshirt juniors. They've got this year and next year, and then their careers are over. So you're at that point now where it's like, well, if it's going to happen, it better happen. And it better happen like right now. Because if it doesn't, you start to really lose faith or lose whatever remaining faith there was about the possibility of it happening long term. So that's a concern. But I'll tell you, I think the back 7 can be really good. Oh, yeah? Yeah, they got some really athletic linebackers, young guys who haven't played a lot, but really athletic players at linebacker. Their safeties they're loaded at safety. They've got Donovan McMillan. You might remember him. He was a 4-star guy at Peters Township. He went to Florida. Then he transferred back here. He had 100 tackles last year. It was only the second time a guy under Narduzzi has had 100 tackles in a season. How about that? 9 years. And only twice has there been a player with 100-plus tackles in the season. It was McMillan. The other one was Jordan Whitehead, which that's a pretty good company to be in. But he's going to be really good. They got like 2 other veteran safeties. They got 2 really young safeties. They are loaded. They're going to be really good, and I think they're just going to keep getting better. It's going to be a real competition there. At corner, they've got a lot of spots to fill. I mean, they have all the spots to fill. Everybody who started a game last year, and everybody who played pretty much any meaningful snap last year, they're all gone, all 3 guys. And so they're going to have a lot of youth and inexperience and new players stepping in at corner. But I'll tell you, they've been really good at transitioning through corners over the course of the last 9 years. They basically, over the last 9 years, here's something you can drop on your friend or whoever it is you're talking to. You'd be like, look, over the last 9 years, they've had 10 corners who played at least 200 snaps in a single season. So 10 guys that were primary starters, rotation contributors. 5 out of those 10 have been drafted, which seems to me like a pretty high number. And out of those other 5, you had some pretty good players, some guys who contributed. I mean, Ryan Lewis had 2 big interceptions for Pitt in 2016. I think he had the Penn State game winner, and then I think he had one at Clemson too that year. Trying to think who Lafayette Pitts was a nice player. AJ Woods and Marquez Williams did a good job here. So they've been able to just roll new guys in. Now they haven't really had a wholesale changeover like they're having this year, where they have no experienced players back. Usually it's you have one experienced guy back and one new guy, and then the next year you have that new guy is now the experienced guy. You have a new guy coming in with him, and so they haven't had this all new look like they've got with the corners this year. But I think they've recruited well at those positions, and I think they've they've just got enough of a track record of development that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I really am, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think they'll be good. Of course, you need to get pressure up front. That's a big part of the puzzle, and that's what it's going to come down to. You'll have more luck getting pressure up front if the other team has to throw the ball. The other team will have to throw the ball if you, say it with me, score more points. And that's how you wrap it up. That's how you bring it back around for whoever you're talking to. And if they want to bring up punting, be like, well, you know what? Maybe you should just not punt as much. Maybe you should score more points. If they want to ask about field goal kicking, you'd be like, yeah, Ben Sauls is awesome. But they should not be settling for field goals as much as they have in the past couple years. It's all about the offense. And that's the lasting point that I think we all understand. I understand it. I think you understand it. And anybody who wants to know about Pitt, that's what they need to understand. It's all about offense. Pat Narduzzi went all in on a wholesale change with the offense this year. And if it works, they'll be all right. If it doesn't, we're going to have big questions to ask after this season. And Pat Narduzzi is going to have big questions to answer when he finally talks to the media again in spring camp. And that's it. That's what you say to your friend who asks you, how's Pitt going to be this year? That's 20 minutes of answering that question. Now, again, you got to gauge the interest. Is everybody going to want to hear 20 minutes? Because we could probably go longer, too. I mean, right? I mean, we cut ourselves off at 20 minutes. We could have talked much longer than that. If they want to hear more than 20, you can keep talking. But those are the main points to hit on. That's the main stuff you need to talk about. All right. We're going to keep getting you ready for training camp all week until it starts on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we'll have our first episode recapping training camp. We'll have our live show Wednesday night to talk about what we saw on Wednesday morning. Lots of coverage. Everything you could possibly need right here at Panther-Lair.com and YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to never miss any of our Pitt video content. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. Training camp is here. It feels like summer is not over because it's really hot out, but it's a real transition point as we move into training camp and the start of the 2024 football season. I'm excited that it's here. I'm excited you'll be following along right here, and can't wait to talk about it. So like and subscribe. Have a great Monday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.